Hey guys, and welcome to the video. By the end of this session, you're going to know how to create a class and an instance of your class. We're then going to look at the difference between an attribute and a method. If you're returning back to the channel, then thank you very much, I really appreciate it. However, if you're new here, then this channel is all about explaining tips and tricks in Python in a really simple and easy to understand way. The first thing we'll look at is the idea of a class being a template. And that's effectively all a class is. It's a template which describes what something should look like. If you think about what happens whenever you create a list, a string, or a dictionary, you can go ahead and create those in Python, and they always act the same way. So with a list, we can always append stuff to it, we can sort it, we can reverse it, and that's because in the list class, those methods have already been defined for you. And all we're doing is using them. So they're defined in the class, and then we can just use them in our daily life in Python, which is pretty good. What we'll do first is build a really simple template and then create an instance of our class. And the first thing we're going to do is use the class keyword to tell Python that we're about to make a new template or a new class. And let's just do this as a really simple person class here. We generally title case our class names, and if it's two words bunched together, you generally do what's called camel case, so you can do something like that, which is totally fine. Again, just a convention, but it's good to follow. We're going to do a colon here, and then on the next line, we're going to do something really important. And this is something that I've seen misunderstood quite a lot, and this is called our constructor or our initializer. I'm going to go ahead and make the first line, and then we'll walk through exactly what's happening. Okay, that's the first line of our constructor here. So basically what this is saying this is my template. And then the first thing that's going to happen when somebody makes an instance of this class is as follows. So that's what this does. It's basically saying, here's how to get set up. Here's what to do first when somebody makes an instance of the person class. And we can see there's three things in here. There's self, name, and age. And these three things are going to be really important in the next couple of minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this off and explain exactly what these are doing here. And there we go. So that's my initializer finished off and ready to go. So just to kind of tell you what these are going to do here. So this self, this is probably the most confusing part in my opinion. Self is a reference back to the variable. So if I go ahead and now create an instance, let's say I said A is equal to a person, and then I start to do some stuff here. This self is actually a reference to A. So I'm just going to write that here just for your reference. So self, imagine that just pointing to A here. So now I need to pass in two more things. If I didn't pass in anything at all, it's saying it's missing one required thing. Let's pass in nothing at all. It should say missing two required arguments, name and age. So it's basically saying, I need these two. So I'm going to go ahead and pass in, let's say name as James. Let's say this person's 100 years old. There we go. And that's pretty happy. So what happened there? Let's just walk through that. We defined a template for a person. We created a method to say, here's how to get set up when an instance is created of that person. On line 28, we created the instance, and A is automatically passed in as self. So imagine in here now we have A, James, 100. And this bit here, this self.name, that's basically saying A's name is equal to the name that was passed in here, so James. So this is basically saying A.name is equal to James, and this bit here is basically saying A.age is equal to 100, like that. And we call these two things here attributes. An attribute is just a piece of information, that's all it is. A piece of info that sits inside a variable. So in this case we can say our person class has two attributes, name and age. Those attributes are passed in here when we created a person using the constructor here. I'm also going to write on this line here, Now, depending on where you look, this kind of gets given a couple of different names. There we are, like that. Initializer or constructor are both, I'd say, passable names for this here. And what's interesting is that this is actually called by itself. There's some stuff that goes on behind the scenes, so whenever you set up an instance of something, this is basically looked for and called automatically. So let's say called automatically here. So you don't actually see like an explicit call to this. So you wouldn't see something like this. You can in some situations, but you don't have to because this is done for you by itself. So upon us saying, right, the variable A contains an instance of the person class, just by you evoking that line, this is essentially ran for you. This runs and says, okay, let's take in what the variable was, A. Let's take in name and age, get them from here. And let's say, right, let's stick James and 100 to that variable A. So A's name is James, A's age is 100. And then what we can do is access those here. So now I'm saying from the variable A, go and access the name attribute and go and access the age attributes here. And there we go, James 100. What we could also do is, because this is now a template, is make multiple things from the same template. So if I was to say, let's say Alice, let's do 50, could quite easily take this, let's make some space here, change A to B for these lines, and now we have two instances, and then in these two print statements here, we're saying, show me the attributes that belong to A, and show me the attributes that belong to B. There we go. James 100, Alice 50. Let's walk through the path that both of these would have took. So Python runs from top to bottom. We define our template first, so that our template is good to go. Line 28 comes along, uses that template to say, right, let's make A into an instance of the person class with the name and age set to James 100. All done. Now let's make B a second instance of the person class with name and age set to Alice and 50. On line 31 and 32, we've simply said, show me A's attributes, show me B's attributes. And there we go. So just to recap back here for a second, our class is our template. That's what we defined here. We defined a template for how a person should look. What we then did is create two instances. So we had A and B, each being their own instance there. And then we defined two attributes, name and age. So these were bits of information that belong to the class. In a later video, we'll discuss the different types of attributes. We can actually have instance and class attributes, which are slightly different. But these are just bits of information that belong to the class or the instance. What we'll do now is look at a method. Now, the way to see a method in a really interesting way is that it's effectively just a function that belongs to the class. That's all it is. It looks a lot like a function, and it behaves a lot like a function as well, except when we define them, we don't define them here, outside of the scope of the class. We define them here. So they always want to be at the same level of indentation as this one. And let's just do a really simple method just to print off the person's information. So we'll do the name, and in here we always want to say self, and I'll refer back to this once we've written the method and explain what this means here. And the job of this is simply going to be, let's return a nice f string. So if I just do hello, I am blank, let's do a comma, and then say blank years old. So a nice simple little method here. And inside this I'm going to do self.name. Inside this one I'm going to do self.age. And that is our simple method here. So the whole point of self to this is, recall how with the initialization method, self effectively referred back to the variable automatically. So when we made our person here, A was passed as self automatically. The same thing is true for these methods here. So A is actually passed to this function automatically. Think of it as a function in that regard then. A is passed in here. So therefore, if self is A, this is saying, hello, I am a.name, a.age, which means, if I can just quickly comment these out and do a.sayHello, there we go, that's calling it, and because that's returning, I need to print that. So I'll put this inside a print function, hit run, and there we go. So a.sayHello, which means a is passed in here as self by default, so therefore a.name, a.age. Let's switch out a for b. So now b is being passed in as self, so therefore hello, I am b.name, b.age, and that's all because of this. So when we hit run now, we get hello, I'm Alice, 50 years old. Just to recap one more time, your class is your template. So we define a template like this here, and anything you want to happen as part of some initial setup is going to be indented underneath our initializer or our constructor. Self is passed in automatically, and this is a reference to the variable, in this case a or b. An instance is simply one of the class, so in this case a or b, or our instances here. So these are not the class, but they are made from the class template. If the class is a template, these are things made from that template, that are instances in this case. An attribute is a variable that belongs to the class. In this case, these are two variables here, so name and age. So you couldn't access these outside the class, for example. So in this case here, we defined name and age inside our initializer or our constructor, and then as part of the setup, we said, right, let's take those names and ages and give them to A and B, in this case. And finally, we looked at a method. And a method is simply a function that belongs to the class. So if I just do a quick example here, if I was just to do def add, say AB, let's do return A plus B, there's quite a significant difference. This is a normal run-of-the-mill function that can be called anywhere underneath it. This one is a method because it belongs to the person class. It's inside the person class, therefore this is a method. This is not inside the class, therefore this is a function. Okay? In future videos, we're going to dig a little bit deeper. We're going to look at class attributes and instance attributes. We'll also take a look at some more complicated methods as well. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to subscribe. I really appreciate it. And of course, check out the description for the video to links to some more Python resources. Thank you for watching, and I hope you all have a great day. Cheers.